by saying the people who know her best love her most. And I can't think of a finer thing to say about any person. Thank you, Mr. President, and I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
The Senator from Massachusetts.
Mr. President, first of all, I want to say what a pleasure it is to welcome Senator Sarbanes back here. I had the pleasure of sitting beside him on the Foreign Relations Committee for, I think, 24 years. And I would just say to him, we miss his judgment and wisdom here. We could use him these days. And it's great to see him back here. I also want to welcome Governor O'Malley here. I can't think of a time when people have stood up to laud a fellow senator that the governor of their state is sitting here and listening. And I think all of the comments to this moment and beyond will undoubtedly echo the remarkable affection that everybody has for Barbara Mikulski, and particularly the high regard in which she is held. This is a very special celebration. The longest serving woman in the history of the United States Congress, 12,862 days today and counting. And in that time, I recall that when I first came here, there was one woman serving, Nancy Kassebaum. And it's fair to say that Barbara Mikulski has been one of the pivotal forces in creating here, assembling what I would call a true band of sisters, the women with whom she has served in the Senate, each of whom makes extraordinary contributions to this institution. We've heard from other colleagues that her career is just filled with milestones, and it is. You know, first Democratic woman to serve in both houses of Congress, first Democratic woman elected to Senate leadership, first woman elected to statewide office in Maryland. These are just a few. When she came to the Senate in 1986, after 10 years in the House of Representatives, women were still, as she describes it, these are her words, a bit of a novelty in the Senate. And indeed, then it was only Barbara and Senator Nancy Kassebaum. But now Barbara says, and I quote, "We're not viewed as novelties. We're not viewed as celebrities. We're viewed as U.S. senators." And one of the reasons for that is that Barbara Mikulski has demonstrated a seriousness of purpose, an ability to legislate, an ability to make friends and bring people together that has really defined her role as the dean of the women in the Senate. Some of the women in the Senate, some of her colleagues, call her dean. Others call her Coach Barb. But no matter what they call her, she has brought them together in this bipartisan sisterhood, as we just heard from the senator from Texas. She holds workshops, serves as a mentor to all newcomers, organizes regular monthly dinners. Now, they don't always agree on everything, but the dinners are what some of them have called a zone of civility, which is something that the Senate could use a little more of these days. And again, it's Barbara Mikulski's example that helps point in that direction. But for all of her firsts, I would say to you, Mr. President, that Barbara Mikulski's career has never been defined by, or it's not really about, gender. It's about the agenda. I've had the privilege of working with her enough on different issues, of being what she calls one of her Galahads. I've seen this laser focus on what's right, on her conscience, on her gut, on her sense of what the people of Maryland want and what she thinks is her duty as a United States Senator. That's why I wanted her on the Speaker's platform in 2004 in Boston at the convention, and she delivered just the right message. In her forceful and commanding way, she stood up there and she declared, "When women seek power, we don't seek it for ourselves. We seek it to make a difference in the lives of other people." And there's no arguing, as we've heard from a number of colleagues, about what an extraordinary difference Barbara Mikulski has made in the lives of other people, not just Marylanders, but all Americans. She's been an extraordinary advocate for the Goddard Space Center, for the Wallops Flight Facility, for Johns Hopkins Applied Science. the lab in Maryland, the Port of Baltimore, the Chesapeake Bay cleanup efforts. And for decades, she proudly worked beside my colleague of 26 years, Ted Kennedy. She loved Ted Kennedy, and Ted Kennedy loved her. And together on the Health Committee, they worked to make universal health care a reality. And her role when Senator Kennedy was sick was an extraordinary role of picking up that baton and helping to bring it across the finish line. Along the way, she became a leader on women's health, fighting for equality in health research and making sure that women get the quality of care that they deserve. She was one of the chief sponsors of the Medicaid financing of mammograms and pap smears. And I will never forget personally how Barbara reacted when the National Institute of Health said it would not include women in trials of aspirin as a preventer for heart attacks because, quote, their hormones present too many biological variables. Later, Barbara fired back, my hormones rage because of comments like that. Her proudest accomplishment, she says, is the Spousal Improvement Act, which helps to keep seniors from going bankrupt while paying for a spouse's nursing home care. But throughout her career, Barbara Mikulski has fought to strengthen the safety net for seniors, for children, for anyone who needed somebody to stand up for them or push open a door for them. That fight started in East Baltimore, where her Polish immigrant grandparents ran a bakery and her father a grocery store. And she says she often watched her father opening the doors of his grocery store for local steel workers so they could buy their lunches before the morning shift. She got it in her head at that time that she'd rather be opening doors for others on the inside than knocking on doors from the outside. So no surprise, after college, she got a job as a social worker, helping at-risk children and educating seniors about Medicare. She got involved in politics by organizing community groups to stop a highway from going through the Highlandtown neighborhood where she grew up. And let me tell you, Mr. President, nobody had ever seen anything like her. At one rally, she jumped up on a table and cried, the British couldn't take Fells Point, the termites couldn't take Fells Point, and goddamn if we'll let the State Roads Commission take Fells Point. And as they say on ESPN, the crowd went nuts, and the Roads Commission never knew what hit them, and I assure you, Mr. President, I assure everybody that was a non-profane use of our Lord's name. Again, no surprise, that led to her election to the City Council. And I think that explains a lot about just how good a politician she is, how well she knows the street. I think every one of her colleagues, all of us, are in awe of Barbara's ability to focus in on the street emotion, on the simplicity of an argument, and to be able to sum it up in a razor-like comment that just cuts to the quick and makes the rest of us who search around for the words seem pretty inept in the process. Whether it's at Camden Yards, Fells Point, the Eastern Shore, the Washington suburbs, or up along the Mason-Dixon line, Barbara has her finger on the political pulse of Marylanders. She understands their concerns, shares their aspirations, and sums up their hopes and their dreams in a few short sentences that nobody else can parallel. Mr. President, if anyone expected Barbara Mikulski to accept being just a novelty or a celebrity in Congress, they obviously had no understanding of her deep roots as an immigrant, urban American, and the values that she learned about hard work in her family. And if anyone expects her to slow down now just because she's now the longest-serving woman in the history of Congress, they don't know Barbara Mikulski. A couple of years ago, Barbara and I talked, I think it was at one of our retreats, about how similar Maryland and Massachusetts are in certain ways, especially the rural and fishing histories, which we actually both have. She told me she wasn't much of a fisherman, but she liked to hunt. And the only problem was, she cited, the recoil of the rifle, given that she stands 4 feet 11 inches tall. Well, it is clear from the record, clear from the comments of all of our colleagues, from this extraordinary, longest-serving record in the Congress and all that she has accomplished, that she stands as one of the tallest United States senators and packs a punch way beyond her 4 foot 11 inches. We're proud to have her as a colleague, and we are in awe of her ability here to galvanize action, which is what this institution should be all about. I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
The Senator from Maryland.
Mr. President, I know, first of all, let me say I'm enormously touched and gratified about the warm words that my colleagues have spoken on both sides of the aisle. And I'm particularly moved by the fact of the men of Maryland who are here today. The wonderful words of Senator Cardin, my colleague, and also here today, Governor O'Malley and when I came to the Senate, my senior colleague, Paul Sarbanes. Governor O'Malley and Senator Sarbanes are over here, but they're on the bench, but these men are certainly not backbenchers. And I must say about the governor and Senator Sarbanes, Senator Cardin, they prove the old adage that men of quality will always support good women who seek equality. And I've enjoyed their support, their wise counsel, and their collegial efforts in behalf of the people of Maryland in my years in Maryland politics. It's a great honor to be here today, passing this significant benchmark where I become the longest-serving woman in the history of the Congress, both in the House, where I served 10 years, in the Senate. It's a great honor for me to be able to pass into the history books with an esteemed person like Senator Margaret Chase Smith. And we spoke about that in January 2011 when I was sworn in. There were tributes that day and wonderful, wonderful words from our two women senators from Maine. And today, actually over the weekend, I surpassed the record of Edith Norse Rogers, who was the longest-serving woman in the House. Both of those women came from New England. They were both hardy, resilient, and fiercely independent. As I've read their histories, so admired them. They were known for a devotion to constituent service, an unabashed sense of patriotism, and kind of telling it like it is. I hope that as I join them in the history books, that I can only continue with the same spirit of devotion to duty and that fierce independence and patriotism. Mr. President, I didn't start out wanting to be a historic figure. You know, you don't say, oh, what do you want to be when you grow up? I want to be a historic figure. When I was growing up, it was about service. For me, it's not how long I serve. It's not about history. You know, for me, history books were Jane Addams and Abigail Adams and powdered wigs, and I just welcome a day where I have time to even powder my nose, let alone powder my wig. But the fact was that what I wanted to grow up was to be of service. And I learned that in my home, in my family, in my community, and with the wonderful nuns who taught me. My colleagues here have talked about my wonderful mother and father. I had a terrific mother and father, and I'm so happy today that my two sisters and my fantastic brother-in-laws are joining me here today. I only wish my mother and father could be here with me because they worked so hard to see that my sisters and I had an education, a significant sacrifice to them. But they were really wonderful people, and you saw them in a life of business. Every day my father would open his grocery store and say, "Good morning, can I help you?" And when he did, he wanted to be sure that his customers got a fair deal. And he opened his grocery store during the New Deal because he believed in Roosevelt. And as my father said, "Barb, I knew Roosevelt believed in me." Then I also had the benefit of the wonderful Catholic nuns who educated me. I had the benefit of going to a school called the Institute of Notre Dame and then Mount St. Agnes College, the Sisters of Notre Dame and the Sisters of Mercy. These women who had concentrated their life to the message of Christianity and the message of Jesus Christ really wanted to make sure that women in America could learn and be part of our society. They didn't only teach us our 3 R's, they taught us about leadership and service, but they also taught us about other values, the values of love your neighbor, care for the sick, worry about the poor, be hungry and thirst after justice. When I was at the Institute of Notre Dame, a school that Nancy Pelosi went to as well, there was something called the Christopher Movement, after St. Christopher. And it said it was better to light one little candle than to curse the darkness. That's what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a social worker. I even thought about being a doctor. One time, I even thought about being a Catholic nun, but that vow of obedience kind of slowed me down a little bit. Because, Mr. President, in this country, wonderful things happen. When my great-grandmother came to this country, she had little money in her pocket, but a big dream in her heart that she could be part of the American dream, that she could own a home in her own name, in her own right, that she could have a job, and that so could the people in her own family, and that based on merit and hard work, you could be something. Well, in 3 generations, I've become a United States Senator. Only in America, the story of my family could have occurred. Modest beginnings, hard work, effort, neighbor helping neighbor. And as much has been said about my fight for the highway, I was really thinking about getting a doctorate in public health at Johns Hopkins. But they were going to run that highway through the neighborhood, the older ethnic neighborhood, African-American neighborhoods. We were viewed in some of those neighborhoods as the other side of the tracks. I wanted to fight to keep those neighborhoods on track. So I took on City Hall, and I did fight them. And in this country, what happened? In another country, they would have taken a protester like me and put me in jail. Instead, in the United States of America, they sent me to the City Council. I worked hard there, and 5 years later, when Senator Paul Sarbanes, who was a congressman, ran for the Senate, I ran for his House seat, and I got the job. When I arrived in the House in 1976, only 19 women were serving, 14 Democrats and 5 Republicans, only 5 women of color. When in 2012, there are 74 women in the House, 50 Democrats, 24 Republicans, 26 women of color. And here in the Senate, there are now 17 women serving, 12 Democrats, 5 Republicans. Today, we saw here visiting us was Senator Carol Moseley Braun, a woman of color who served well while she was here. Those are the numbers, and those were the statistics. And though I joined this long number of first, for me, it's not how long I've served, but how well I've served. When I came to the Congress, I became a member of the fabulous 3rd Congressional District. My job was to represent a blue-collar community that was in economic transition. What did we do? We were a community that built things here so we could ship them over there. We built cars. We built ships. We made steel. We knew that if a country didn't make something and build something, it couldn't make something of itself. I fought for those blue-collar people. I fought to keep those jobs in manufacturing. We fought for the Port of Baltimore, its dredging, so we could bring in the big ships so that we could have exports. We worked again for those people in those manufacturing areas while we saw jobs go overseas. And then we worked very hard for cities to make sure that our cities were safe, that we had great schools, and that they had a chance of making it. I fought hard for health care. One of my greatest pieces of legislation was the Spousal Impoverishment Act, that if one spouse went into a nursing home, the other spouse wouldn't have to spend down their life savings so that they would lose their home. AARP tells me my legislation of so many years ago that stands today have kept 1 million people from losing their home or their family farm. Those were the battles then. Those were the battles when I changed my address when I came to the United States Senate. Though I changed my address, the battles are still the same. Jobs, social justice, opportunity based on hard work, peace in the world and continue to fight for this. But for me, it's not only about issues. Issues are so abstract. Issues can be so bloodless when we talk about it. For me, issues are about people. The people I represented in my own hometown, the people I represent in my state, and the people I know live in the United States of America. My favorite thing is being out there talking to the people, going into diners, going table to table, listening to their stories, holding roundtables with parents whose children have special needs, meeting with scientists who have discoveries that they think will lead to new ideas and new products that will be new jobs, universities that train our workforce. For me, it's about the people. So as I pass this important benchmark, which I am so honored to do, I want people to know I still am that young girl that watched her father open up that grocery store every day and say, "Good morning, can I help you?" I'm still that young girl that went to the Institute of Notre Dame in Mount St. Agnes College that said, "I'm going to light one little candle. I don't want to curse the darkness." I'm going to continue to fight for a strong economy, a safer America, the people of Maryland. And in conclusion, I just want to say thanks. I want to thank the dear Lord for giving me the chance to be born in the greatest country in the world, to be able to work hard and serve in one of the greatest institutions in the United States of America. But nobody gets to be a me without a whole lot of thee. I want to thank my family. I want to thank the religious women that educated me. I want to thank all of my staff that worked so hard to help me do a good job. And I want to thank the countless of volunteers who believed in me and worked for my election when nobody else did. And most of all, I want to thank the people of the 3rd Congressional District and the state of Maryland who saying, "Barb, we're going to give you your shot. Don't ever forget this. Don't ever forget us." And I want them to know, though I've now served in the Senate 12,892 days, I will never forget them. And every morning I'm saying in my heart, "Good morning, can I help you?" Mr. President, I yield the floor.
Bravo.
Woo!
Mr. President.
The Senator from Washington.
Mr. President, I am so honored to join with so many of my Senate colleagues and people from Maryland and across this country in recognizing and congratulating the amazing woman that you just heard from, my good friend from Maryland, Senator Barbara Mikulski, who, as you have just heard, has just become the longest-serving female member of Congress in the history of the United States. You know, this is really an achievement that takes courage, takes passion, and it takes commitment. Those are 3 things that all of us who know her so well knows she has in abundance. But, Mr. President, my good friend Senator Mikulski has not just served long, she has served well. The senior senator from Maryland, over her 35 years in Congress, has established herself as a trailblazer, as a leader, and as a fighter for the people of her state. It is fitting, Mr. President, that this milestone was reached during Women's History Month, because Senator Mikulski has given so much of herself in support of other women here in Congress. She has guided us, she has shown us how to stand up and fight, and she has taken all of us under her wing. Senator Mikulski realized when she got here that there was no rule book for women in Congress, so she took it upon herself to guide the way. She drew on her own experiences to make the transition for all of us easier. She organized seminars that you've heard about. She taught us how to work together. She taught us about the legislative process, the rules on the floor, and the many more subtle rules off the floor. In short, Senator Mikulski showed us the ropes, and she has done it every day I've been here for all the women that have come since she's been here. Because while she knows it's important and courageous to lead the charge, she also understands the first ones have to be responsible and successful so others can follow. Mr. President, it's because Senator Mikulski has done her job so well that other women have been able to follow her in her footsteps. So she is here today as the longest-serving woman in Congress, not by accident or by happenstance. She's here because she has earned it, because the people of her state know she is an indispensable champion of their causes, because she does work across party lines, and because she delivers results. Mr. President, I know many years from now, when women have achieved a larger, more representative role in our nation's capital, Senator Mikulski will be at the very top of the list of people to thank. The person who not only forged the path, but who went back and guided so many of us down it. So, Mr. President, I know many of my colleagues are here on the floor today to thank Senator Mikulski, but I'm here especially to thank her as one of those women who has followed her in her footsteps for her more than 35 years of service to her state and to her country, and those of us who know her well know she is not even close to being finished. So, Mr. President, my very best to my very good friend, Senator Mikulski, and I wish her very well in her next 35 years. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor.
The Senator from New York.
You know, I, too, want to speak of my dear friend Barbara Mikulski, who is just precious. She is precious to her family. She is precious to the people of the 3rd Congressional District that she represented for 10 years. She is precious to the people of Maryland, precious to the people of the United States, and precious to those of us who have the privilege of serving with her in this body. She's been affectionately known as a few things here: the Dean of Women, the breaker of the ceiling, as Patty Murray just said, setting the stage, setting the rule book, writing the rule book for women in the Senate. There will be, Mr. President, 51 women in the Senate one day. There will be. And it will come much more quickly because Barbara Mikulski was really the first. There's no question about that. And the Senate will be a better place for it in so many different ways. She's also not only known as the Dean of Women, we love her. She's known as Barb. And I love calling her up on the phone late at night and having her say, "This is Barb. Please call me. Make sure you say the words of leave the phone number twice." And of course, when Barb says something, we all do it. So I always leave the phone number twice. Now, I admire so much about her. But one of the things at the top of the list is who she's the real deal. She knows where she came from. She has never forgotten where she came from. And as I have told her personally, she has that internal gyroscope of who she is, what she should do, how she should do it, that guides her almost instinctively. And it's probably the most precious thing a politician can have. And not very many people really have it. But hers is about the best I have ever witnessed. It started from her upbringing and her faith, which she mentioned. We've talked about Willie. She's mentioned Willie. But you never forget how she reminds us, because it's with her, and you can see it in her actions every day, how when people would come into the store that Willie had, the grocery store in East Baltimore, and they'd lost their job, or someone was very sick, Willie would say, "Take the groceries and pay me later." It reminded me of my grandfather, Jake. We've talked about this, who was an exterminator, not quite the same as Willie and not providing the same services. But he would tell people, if you have roaches and rats in your house and you can't pay, I'll still exterminate. Pay me when you have money. So I understood that instinctively. I'd love Willie to have met my Grandpa Jack, because I'm sure they were kindred souls in a lot of ways. And the guidance of Willie and Barb's mom, you can see it every day in the way she acts. And I just want to say another thing about Barb. She got into public service as a community activist. There was a highway that was going to tear up an important and historic part of her community, and she got involved. And, you know, being schooled by her and many of my colleagues, Many women felt, oh, they would be excluded from politics if they went into politics directly. But when you're a community activist and you take a lead because something's bothering you about your home or your neighborhood, politics just follows sort of naturally. It's a little bit like Patty Murray's story as well. These days, because of what Barb has done, I think my daughters can aspire, I don't know if they do, but can aspire to go into political life directly. But in those days, it was much harder. But there she was. And she led this fight. She went on to the city council, of course the 3rd CD in Maryland, and now to this august chamber. She's done so much. It's been cataloged by all my colleagues. Medical research. There are probably millions of people alive today because of the 35 years that she has pushed to make that happen. They don't know who they are, but they're there, and they're living happy and healthy because of Barb Mikulski. How about veterans and health care needs? Again, literally tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of our veterans are living much better lives because they were able to get the health care that Mikulski spearheaded, particularly in the earlier days when this was not a popular cause. And the list goes on and on and on. She has done so much. And in our chamber, she's beloved. Beloved. People are sometimes afraid of her when she gets mad. People want her approval. But most of all, I think what most of us seek is her advice. Because after so many years in politics, she has that gift to understand what the average person needs and to talk directly to them. She doesn't talk through her colleagues or doesn't talk through the media or doesn't talk through some community leader or other politician. She's still talking to that family sitting in East Baltimore or in Hagerstown or in Annapolis. She almost has them in front of her eyes wherever she goes. And that's why her speeches are so effective. She doesn't try to polish them. That's not her. She speaks from the heart directly to the people, and she cares so much about them that it comes through. It's an amazing trait. One of the things I most admire about people in political life is people who never forget where they came from, Mr. Speaker. She's one of the most powerful people, not just women, one of the most powerful people in America. Persons. Maybe I'm saying that wrong, but she wouldn't be mad at that. And yet, she's just too, I didn't know Barb Mikulski when she was a community activist in East Baltimore, but my guess is she's exactly the same today. All the power and the accomplishments and the emoluments and the praise, all deserved, have not changed her a whit. That, to me, says an amazing thing about an individual. So, Barb, I know my colleagues are waiting, but we love you. We cherish you. And as Patty Murray said, I'll put it my own way, I am sure with Barbara Mikulski, knowing her as well as I do, the best is yet to come. Madam President, I yield the floor.
Madam President.
The senator from Rhode Island is recognized.
Madam President, I'd like to join my colleagues in a tribute to Senator Mikulski. I see my distinguished friend Senator Cochran on the floor, and I want to know if he'd like. Oh, very good then. I'm delighted to join my colleagues in joining in this tribute to perhaps our favorite colleague, Barbara Mikulski, on her becoming the longest-serving woman in congressional history. Her work in these halls has made our country stronger, and in a place where partisan rancor too often rules the day, she has established a legacy of service to her constituents and to all of us in this body that stands as an example to every one of us. Her political career began in the late 1960s when she launched a campaign to stop the construction of a highway over historic neighborhoods she wanted to protect in Baltimore. She won that battle and went on to run for the Baltimore City Council in 1971. More than 40 years later, and following a successful stint in the U.S. House of Representatives, Barbara Mikulski continues to blaze an impressive trail. During her 27 years in the Senate, she became the first woman to sit on the Senate Appropriations Committee, the first woman to chair an Appropriations Subcommittee, and the first Democratic woman elected to Senate leadership. Last year, we celebrated Barbara as she became the longest-serving female senator, and now she's crossed yet another milestone, passing Congresswoman Edith Norris Rogers of Massachusetts, having served in the United States Congress longer than any woman in history. Of course, we don't just celebrate the quantity of Barbara's service, but its quality. No one is better at drilling down to the heart of an issue and expressing it in punchy, unforgettable terms. No one cheers us up more than Barbara when she tells us to stand tall, square our shoulders, put on our lipstick, and rise to the occasion. We don't all put on lipstick, but we all get the message. No one better combines the idealism of politics with the proactive abilities of government. She told me once with a twinkle in her eye, "I'm a reformer, but I'm a bit of a ward healer, too." Practicality and passion combined is what makes politics successful, and no one does this better than Barbara. When she was first elected to the House in 1977, she was one of 21 women in Congress, 18 in the House and only 3 in the Senate. Today, there are 93 women serving, including 17 senators. And Barbara's earned the distinction of Dean of the Senate Women. But she never forgot her roots as a champion for those who need a voice in this building. In her years in the Senate, Barbara Mikulski's dedication to her constituents and women's rights has been clear. From becoming a champion of women's health issues, to organizing training seminars for women of both parties elected to the Senate, to sponsoring and pushing through with a force that we all remember, the Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Act of 2009. During my much shorter tenure as a United States Senator, I have had the great privilege and pleasure to work with Barbara to pass landmark health care reform legislation out of the Health Committee. I've also served with her on the Intelligence Committee and worked closely with her on the Senate Intelligence Committee's Cyber Task Force to evaluate cyber threats and issue recommendations to the full committee. I have taken from those experiences great affection and respect for Senator Barbara Mikulski. These are issues that are complex and complicated, difficult and abstruse, and she brought to them the verve and the vigor and the vision to move on them, and those really are her hallmarks: verve, vigor, and vision. I know that all of us here in this chamber are proud to call Senator Barb our colleague and friend as she makes history yet again. Her hard work and collegial spirit have enriched this Senate, and I wish her all the best in the accomplishments ahead. On behalf of all Rhode Islanders, Senator Mikulski, I congratulate you for this milestone in your history, the Senate's history, and our nation's history. I yield the floor.
The senator from Georgia is recognized.
Madam President, I consider it an honor and a privilege to rise for a moment and pay tribute to Senator Mikulski from the state of Maryland. And in so doing, I think it's only appropriate that I quote from a speech made on the 22nd of November in 1922 by the first woman ever to serve in the United States Senate. Rebecca Latimer Felton was the first senator in the Senate to be a woman. She was appointed for one day. Governor Brown had run against Walter George for the United States Senate. Walter George won, and because of Ms. Latimer's and Ms. Felton's unending help to him in his race, he asked the governor if he would appoint her for a day to his seat before he took it and was sworn in. And she came to Washington, D.C. to serve for one day, and she made one speech. And in that speech, she had a paragraph that, to me, exemplifies Barbara Mikulski. She said, and I quote, "Let me say, Mr. President, that when the women of the country come and sit with you, though there may be very few in the next few years, I pledge to you that you will get ability, you will get integrity of purpose, you will get exalted patriotism, and you will get unstinted usefulness," end quote. That was Rebecca Felton in 1922. Today, in March of 2012, we honor a senator who has lived up to every one of those promises Ms. Felton made almost 100 years ago. I've had the privilege to serve on the Help Committee with the senator, worked with her closely on the Alzheimer's legislation, which she has been such a leader on, worked with her on many other projects, including one I am happy to remind her about. And that was a confirmation of Wendy Sherman just a few months ago when together on the floor of the Senate, we worked together to see that she was appointed and named and confirmed Under Secretary of State for the United States of America and serving under Hillary Clinton. And in that night when we worked on getting that UC done, and it wasn't easy, I saw the tenacity, I saw the grace, I saw the patriotism, and I saw the integrity of Barbara Mikulski. And it is an honor for me to rise today and commend her on a great individual achievement, but not just for herself, but for all the women who've gone before her and all the women who will come later on, and for my 5 granddaughters and my daughter. She's lived a life in the United States Senate exemplary of the contribution that all women can make to our society, and I commend her on her service, her compassion, her integrity, and all that she has done for the state of Maryland, the United States of America, and peace on this earth. So, Barbara, congratulations to you on a great achievement. It's an honor for me to be here. And if I could ask unanimous consent, I want to make one other recognition, if I can, and ask that it be separated in the journal.
With that objection, so ordered.
This past weekend, Georgia lost a great, great citizen. Furman Bisher died in St. Simons, Georgia on Saturday afternoon of a tragic heart attack. He was the premier sports writer in the United States of America, covered every Super Bowl, every Masters, was at every major heavyweight fight. And from the day he started typing on his Royal manual typewriter until the day that he died, he typed on that same manual typewriter that was over 60 years old. He was a brilliant writer, a compassionate individual, a great friend, and someone I look up to very much. And he was a pace setter. He actually got the only interview of Shoeless Joe Jackson ever done by a reporter. And he did it because of his cunning ability to be in the right place at the right time and that twinkle in his eye that always made you want to talk to Furman Bisher. So as on the floor of the Senate today, I pay tribute to Furman and the life, to all his accomplishments in terms of writing of sports in our state and around the world, and to his family and loved ones. I extend my sympathy on behalf of not just myself, but all the citizens of Georgia. And I yield back.
The senator from Delaware is recognized.
Madam President, I am honored to follow my good friend and colleague from the state of Georgia in recognizing the remarkable contributions of Senator Mikulski, now the longest-serving woman in the history of the United States Congress. Today, we've been joined by many great Marylanders. We've had Governor O'Malley and Senator Cardin and former Senator Sarbanes and Senator Mikulski's own family, her sisters and brother-in-law in the gallery. And I'm also pleased that we've got 2 of her favorite constituents, my father and my brother, watching us today as well. They live in Annapolis, and they've known what I've known since childhood when I lived in the suburbs of Baltimore, that Senator Mikulski is a remarkable, a tireless, a passionate, and an effective senator. Reference has been made to her start as a community organizer, someone who saved Fells Point from a 16-lane superhighway, someone who wasn't afraid to get into the gritty issues of a local community and standing up for folks who didn't have anyone to fight for them. We've also heard about her early years as a social worker, helping folks in need understand the programs available to them and then fight for the programs that should have been available to them. And it's no surprise to any of us that the district she first represented in the House of Representatives, the 3rd, was known as a steel district, where lots of men and women worked in the in the Bethlehem steel plant. And it's no surprise that she's earned a reputation here in the Senate as a woman of steel, who fights for manufacturers, who fights for federal workers, who fights for Western Maryland, who fights for poultry on the peninsula and the eastern shore of Maryland, who fights for her constituents day in and day out. It is indeed just that in this Women's History Month, we would be recognizing Senator Barbara Mikulski, who has stood up for Maryland each and every day. And though, like me, she comes up a little short every time she stands incredibly tall in the company of senators throughout American history. She is someone whose passion for people, whose determination to continue in the tradition of her father, that fair deal grocer, who asks every day that simple question, how can I help? And then gets busy answering it. She is a role model for me, for all of us, for my daughter, for my family, for our community. She's the only senator who I've heard say to me fiercely before going on a vote on the floor, to the barricades. and the only person who could say that and mean it. For a lifetime, she's been at the barricades of justice, she's been at the barricades of service, she's been at the barricades of making a difference. And for that, we are all grateful. Madam President, I yield the floor.
Thank you. The senator from Alaska is recognized.
Thank you, Madam President. And I, too, stand today to pay recognition to a friend, a colleague, and truly a woman who brings a smile to my face. Because for as many years as she has served her state of Maryland, for as many years as she has served in the halls of Congress, she has the enthusiasm, the spontaneity, the excitement when she approaches an issue as a brand new rookie freshman coming into this body. And that's really quite remarkable, because around here we can get kind of drugged down by the day-to-day, by the politics, the partisan nature, just the conflicts that are inherent in this process. But Senator Barbara Mikulski is one who I think just embraces life and embraces the responsibilities that are put before her, and that she has an opportunity to represent to her constituents. She embraces them with an enthusiasm that should be a reminder to us all of why we are here to serve. I've got so many different stories and quips and quotes about Senator Mikulski, whose name sounds somewhat familiar to mine, Senator Murkowski. And every now and again we have an opportunity to share the same stage, same podium, and the individual who's introducing us will trip on his or her tongue and refer to us wrongly. And there was one occasion where we were being recognized by the National Geographic Society, and she pointed out to the individual who's making the introduction that says, she's the vertical one and I am the not so vertical one. And just a recognition again that regardless of the situation, Barbara Mikulski has got a good comeback, a quick quip. She is a quipmeister if there ever was one. But it speaks again to her enthusiasm and the passion that she brings to the job that she has in front of her. With a name like Murkowski or Mikulski, you clearly have a Polish heritage that you look to with pride. She reminds me of mine because she is perhaps a little more connected to those Polish roots, but again, a sense of pride with who she is and where she has come from and what her family has done in preceding her that allows her to go on and do so much for so many. We have had the opportunity to work together on issues that coming from different parts of the country, truly different ends of the country, you wouldn't think that we would have as much commonality on some of the issues. As the chairman on the Commerce, Justice, Science Appropriations Committee, we have worked closely on issues that relate to our fisheries and enforcements, to the judiciary issues, the coastal issues. She's always reminding me, we got to take care of our fishermen out there. We got to make sure that our families that rely on our waters are appropriately cared for. We've worked together on women's health issues. We were just recently at the Sister to Sister event, and I do feel a kinship, a relationship with this Polish sister here as we talk about those issues that are so important to women's health. We've shared the same concerns about how we do more for our first responders, for our service members, for our veterans. Just this past week, as Senator Mikulski, see, I almost did it myself. I almost called her Murkowski. As she was chairing a committee, and I brought up the issue as it related to late Senator Ted Stevens and the Department of Justice investigation that failed so miserably, and we are now pursuing through different avenues to make sure that nobody should have to go through what Senator Stevens did. Senator Mikulski literally stopped the committee hearing to remind the Attorney General that, in fact, this was not a partisan issue, that this was an issue where we all should be concerned, that if there is no justice within the Department of Justice, what does that mean for us as a nation? And she is never hesitant to speak up and stand up and make very, very clear when these issues are important to the nation. It should know no bounds by party. And Barbara Mikulski has held true to that, I think, in many, many different ways that make this milestone that we're recognizing today even more important. Because I think there is a kind of a piling on of events that can happen here in the halls of Congress, where the weight of what we do on a daily basis just gets to be a load. To a certain extent, you can get tired. You can get worn. But Barbara has not let the weight of the responsibility bring her down. I was joking with her just a little bit ago when all of the accolades were coming her way. I said, Barbara, with all of these kind words that are being said about you, by the time the tributes are done, you're going to be 7 feet tall. And that woman is 7 feet tall in the minds of so many of us. She is a giant for the people of Maryland. She has proven herself to be a giant in so many ways as she works to do good for so many. I'm proud to stand with so many of my colleagues today in recognizing her tenure, recognizing this historic place that she has carved for herself within Congress, and to call her my friend. Thank you, Madam President, and I yield the floor.
Thank you.
Madam President.
The senator from New Jersey is recognized.
Madam President, I rise today to honor the service of one of our most distinguished, long-serving colleagues, the tireless, sometimes relentless, and often spirited senior senator from Maryland, Senator Barbara Mikulski. To say that she is a trailblazer for women in politics is an understatement, as we've heard. She has blazed a bold trail not just for women in politics, but for all women in every endeavor. She's a fighter, an advocate, someone who you hopefully are on the same side on and an issue, because if not, she's a formidable opponent when you're on the opposite side. And she's a role model for leadership and getting things done. Her impressive list of accomplishments is far too long to recite in a few minutes or even a few hours, and it would not adequately do justice to her incredible service to the state of Maryland and the people of this nation. Senator Mikulski has dedicated her career to serving Marylanders and dedicated her life to public service. She began that as a social worker in the neighborhoods of Baltimore, working every day on the street, helping at-risk children find their way and giving seniors the help they needed. She was not and is not a bleeding heart, but there is no one who has a fuller heart, a more open heart to the deepest needs of the least powerful among us than Senator Mikulski. She's someone you want on your side, someone everyone wants on their side, and she came to public service with what I like to call is the long view. She can see beyond herself to the needs of society as a whole, and she has fought for those needs and won on far more occasions than she's lost. When she first ran for public office in 1971, I know she had in her heart the deep and abiding memories of those kids and seniors she met in Baltimore when she began in her career. And I know she carries those memories with her to this day. To this day, she has never forgotten the people of Maryland who need her the most and have had the wisdom to elect her time and time again. Her political career has taken her from the Baltimore City Council to the U.S. House of Representatives and this chamber, where she has honorably served for the past 26 years. For the 7 years that I've had the opportunity to work with her in this chamber, there has been no stronger, more knowledgeable, more committed colleague on this side of the aisle. She's an example for all of her colleagues, determined to work across the aisle when possible and ready to fight for her beliefs when necessary. She was the first woman elected to statewide office in Maryland, the first Democratic woman elected to the Senate in her own right, the first woman to serve in both houses of Congress, the longest-serving female member of the Senate, and as we all know, this past Saturday, Senator Mikulski became the longest-serving woman in the history of the United States Congress, serving more than 35 years in the House of Representatives and the Senate. And it's only fitting that she achieved this milestone during Women's History Month because she has not only paved the way for women in politics, but for women everywhere. I had the opportunity to work with Senator Mikulski during the long and difficult debate and negotiations on health care reform, and her work was instrumental in ensuring that women have access to the comprehensive health care they are now guaranteed under the law. And during that debate, no one's voice was clearer, no one's voice was stronger, no one was more convincing than her in the fight for a woman's right to comprehensive health care coverage. She fought for mandatory insurance coverage of essential services like mammograms and maternity care, services many insurance companies refused to cover. She fought to end gender discrimination by insurance companies. And as a result of the Affordable Care Act, and in large measure because of Senator Mikulski's tireless efforts on behalf of women, being a woman is no longer a pre-existing condition, as insurance companies used to say, that can be discriminated against. And those insurance companies who routinely denied coverage of basic women's health services, essential services, are now required to cover those services under the comprehensive women health services provisions of the law. Whenever there's a need in this chamber for a strong voice for women, whenever there's a need for an advocate to stand up for the powerless against the powerful, whenever there's a child who needs a friend, a senior citizen who needs a hand, Barbara Mikulski's there. I believe there are many times that she comes to this floor, remembering, as she said, her days back in Baltimore, and she's right there, an advocate's advocate, fighting for those children and seniors that she's met along the way. And the rest of us are better off because she comes here with a full heart, ready to do what's right, not just simply what's politically expedient. Her bill, the Lilly Ledbetter Fair Pay Act, was signed into law by President Obama days after his inauguration. And I was proud to work with Senator Mikulski on that and so many other efforts as well that make a difference in the lives of average Americans. And finally, Senator Mikulski has been a tireless advocate for something that is near and dear to my own heart. She's been an advocate for those who suffer from Alzheimer's and their families. As a son of a mother who battled Alzheimer's for 18 years and who lost her life to it, I understand firsthand the unique challenges of providing long-term care for a loved one. And Senator Mikulski has come to this floor on countless occasions advocating for increased research, education, and programs for individuals with Alzheimer's, and has found the support from her colleagues on both sides of the aisle. It's estimated that 5.4 million Americans are currently living with Alzheimer's, and millions more have been touched in some way by this debilitating disease. And I want to thank the Senator from the bottom of my heart for her passion for helping those who suffer from this disease. And I look forward to continuing to work with her on this issue until we find a cure for Alzheimer's. The bottom line, Senator Mikulski is a deeply committed public servant. The state of Maryland has rightly recognized her invaluable service for many years. Because of her efforts, those families know their interests are protected and their voices are heard. It's been an honor to serve with her. All of us in this chamber can hope to serve our states with the same conviction, selflessness, and pride that Senator Mikulski has had throughout her 35 years of service to the state of Maryland. I'm reminded of what Mother Teresa said when she got the Congressional Gold Medal. She said, it's not all the awards and recognitions that one receives in life that matters. It is how one has lived their life that matters. In that respect, Senator Mikulski has lived an extraordinary life, and we thank her for what she's done, not just for the people of Maryland, but for all of the people of the great United States of America. With that, Madam President, I yield the floor.
Thank you. The senator from New Hampshire is recognized.
Madam President, I'm proud to be able to join my colleagues on the floor this afternoon in honoring Senator Barbara Mikulski for her service to Maryland and for the endless contributions she has made to the people of this country. It's really hard to adequately describe a political icon as Barbara Mikulski is. And for all of us women in politics, she is a model of what we can aspire to, what we would hope to aspire to. And I just want to tell a simple story about Barb that I think reflects her ability to get along with people, her zest for life, as so many of my colleagues have described, and the connection that she makes that makes a difference for people. She and I were on a flight with 4 other senators to the Security Forum in Halifax, Nova Scotia a couple of years ago. And the weather was bad, and so our flight was diverted to Bangor, Maine. And it was in winter in New England, and of course, when there's bad weather in New England in the winter, it sticks around for a while. So we were trapped overnight in Bangor. Now, most of us just sort of sat there waiting to figure out what was going to be done while we waited for a flight the next day. But not Barbara, because she doesn't sit still. She's never afraid to pick up the phone and to take action, and that's exactly what she did. She dialed up her old friend and colleague, all of our colleagues, Senator Collins, Susan Collins, and said, "Guess where I am?" And that's how those of us who were on that flight, the 6 senators, the Secretary of Homeland Security, wound up joining Senator Collins and the legendary troop greeters of Bangor, Maine, to welcome troops to the airport as they returned home from overseas. So what seemed like it was going to be an inconvenience turned into a real fabulous opportunity to thank our brave men and women in uniform and to have a good time while we were doing it. And you find those kinds of things happening if you spend time with Barbara Mikulski. It's a byproduct of her relentless energy, her drive to better her community and our nation as a whole, her deep commitment to fighting for women's health, and her unfailing grace and gumption as a legislator, a colleague, and a friend. And as has been said, she got her start as a social worker, trying to make the lives of men and women in her native Baltimore a little easier to bear. She was working in the service of values that were taught to her by her family, who owned the neighborhood grocery store. And as so many have commented, she tells the story of her father opening the store early so that steel workers coming in for the early morning shift would have time to buy their lunch. Barb has carried that spirit, those values that she learned from her family in that grocery store here to the Senate. And often it is sorely needed here, those values. But as Dean of the Women's Caucus, she has built a sense of community within the Women's Caucus. Her bipartisan women's dinners are legendary, and of course, what happens at those dinners stays at those dinners. Those are Mikulski's rules. But we really don't need to look any further than that windy night in Maine to know how effective she's been in making things happen for people. I look forward to more of her dinners, to more conversations with the senator, to more chances to work with her as she fights on behalf of women and seniors and veterans and all those who don't have a voice in government and at the table. I thank the senator for her friendship, for her leadership, and for her many years of service. Thank you.
Madam President.
The senator from West Virginia is recognized.
Thank you so much. Madam President, I, too, am honored to be able to rise today